Okay, so on this live, I'm gonna get straight to the point. I'm going to talk about world history, culture, and as you can see by the title, world leaders now are starting to acknowledge the African presence in pre-Columbian societies. So, a quick little background about me. I like studying cultures worldwide. I believe that information should be shared freely by all people. I believe that information should remain decentralized. I believe in justice for all people. I don't believe that anybody should be mistreated at all, regardless of the color of your skin, your religious background, your your gender, or even the way that you view uh, or assign yourself. Like I believe that regardless of those differences, that all people should be treated fairly, and I think that if we can get to that point, the world would be a much better place. I believe that because I don't want to be mistreated based on who I am, right? So I don't think that I'm better than anyone else. I believe that everyone should be treated fairly. Now that I have that disclaimer out of the way, I'm going to talk about something that could be considered controversial to people who don't like this information, or they feel hostility when we bring up, and I mean we, as a person that's assigned to a non-white status, when we bring up our history, our identity, and how we view the world. So if you don't know, the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, she just created a museum in Mexico dedicated to the Afro-Indigenous cultures in the Americas. And she spent 45 million pesos stating that the indigenous people were in the Americas prior to colonization. I repeat, so the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, built a museum in Mexico for 45 million pesos, acknowledging and dedicating the museum to the African presence in the Americas prior to colonization. Okay, now why is this important? Because people have been stating that black people have been in the Americas for hundreds or thousands of years. Okay, and this is not anything that should be controversial, but it is controversial because a lot of people don't want this information spread. Okay, now like I stated, I don't believe that anybody should be mistreated because of the color of their skin, their gender, or any of that kind of stuff. But when we affirm and we bring up who we are, it becomes offensive to other people. Okay, so I'm going to talk about this subject. I have a degree in history, okay? So I'm not just somebody that's just on the internet rambling. Like, this is actually my profession, is what I do. And so, and I'm interested in it. So, okay, there's three types of black people in this country. You have the black people, or people who would be labeled black, okay? You have the people who were here in the Americas prior to colonization, okay? And we know that they were here because the indigenous people, the ancient people, they love artifacts in San Lorenzo, La Venta, and in central Mexico. They left them in Honduras, Peru, Guatemala. There's pyramids all over the Americas. In North America, we have pyramids in Cahokia, Illinois, which is by St. Louis, Missouri. We have in Louisiana, which is my home state, we have a place called Poverty Point, and Poverty Point is a place that has indigenous people that lived in Poverty Point, Louisiana. They date back over 10,000 years. So we know that people entered into the Americas and was here for thousands of years. So in saying that, there are three type of people that's in the Americas: the people that was here before colonization, the people that came to the Americas during colonization, and they came from different areas, because you had the Spanish, who were the first ones to come here. So Pope Nicholas V, he created a papal bull. One of his papal bulls was called Romanus Pontifex. And what Pope Nicholas decided to do was that the Portuguese and the Spaniards would divide the world up into Eastern and Western hemispheres. So everything west of the Cape Verde and Azores Islands would belong to the Portuguese and the Spaniards. Okay, now this is factual, this is facts. There's nothing that I made up. Okay, you could Google this yourself. I want you guys to Google these things yourself. Anything that I say in this video, I am just a person that's sharing information that I learned along the way. So, okay, so Pope Nicholas V, he made a papal bull, a decree, that they were going to divide the world up. What was going on in Europe prior to colonization was that Europe was in a religious turmoil, and they were fighting over what version of Christianity would become popular. So they decided that everyone should listen to the Pope. Now, this is not to bash any particular religion. If a person is a part of the Catholic Church or any other religion, this is just for historical context, okay? I'm not here to bash anybody based on race, gender, religion, sexuality, nothing. This is not that, okay? This is to be informative, okay? So, okay, in Europe, what was going on at the time is that the Europeans, they were decentralized, and they were fighting one another over what religion would dominate. Would it be Judaism? Would it be Christianity? Would it be paganism? Or would it be Christianity? Now, if you ever been to the Americas or to different places, you would notice that there's different branches of Christianity. You have the Eastern Orthodox Church, you have Baptists, you have Quakers, you have so many different versions of Christianity. If you ever wonder why all of these versions of Christianity exist, is because 400 years ago, they were fighting in Europe over what version of Christianity would dominate, okay? And I'm going to have to speed along in the story to get back to my main point about the Americas. But what was going on in Europe was they were warring with one another. And so in Spain, Spain was the United States before the United States. Spain was the melting pot of Europe. So after the fall of Rome, during the Middle Ages, a lot of people moved to Spain. So Spain had people that they call Moors, people from North Africa, Berbers. You had people from Asia. You had people from the Middle East. You had the people that they call the Visigoths, who lived farther north, who came down into Spain. And the Visigoths, who are the Visigoths? These would be the Germanic tribes or the people of German descent, okay? Now, this is either fact or fiction. It's either true or it's false, okay? So in Spain, you had these people living together. And then what ended up happening is in the 12th century, the 13th century, and the 14th century, these religious wars in Europe are going to become very, very, very violent. And so what was going on in Europe is that people began to be expelled from countries, as well as if they did not convert, they would be, it would be, you would be gone. So at one point in time, the only people who could read the holy books were the clergy and the high people in society. And so as a result of these people being the only people who could read and write, they were able to control what the masses thought about the world, what they thought about religion. And so the invention of the printing press is going to begin to change this. And so when the printing press was created in Gatlinburg, Germany, what ended up happening was people started to print out copies of the Bible. Previously to that, the only people who had access to the Bible were the Latin church, and everything was written in Latin. Then it's going to get converted into Greek, and then it's going to get converted into other languages. Once this happened, people are going to start reading the Bible for themselves, and then that's going to bring them at odds with the Pope and the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church in Spain, they ended up creating what was called the Inquisition. So the Inquisition was created in Spain, which was a melting pot to basically reconquer the Iberian Peninsula, okay? Now, the reason why I have to give this preface or this information about what was going on in Europe prior to colonization is because if you grew up in the American school system, you're not taught these things. You're not taught that blacks, whites, Muslims, Jews, Christians, all of these people were already mingling with one another. It wasn't black and white people have been commingling, Asians, all of the human family have been commingling for a very long time. It's nothing new about that, okay? But what ends up happening in Europe is that people are going to become enthralled in this new version of Christianity. The new version of Christianity is going to start to dominate. Now, what is the new version of Christianity? Okay. The new version of Christianity was a race-based doctrine. And this doctrine, unfortunately, is going to be used as a propaganda tool to take over the world. And so one of the popes got Michelangelo to paint the Sistine Chapel and create a picture of the Last Supper. And then this tool would be a tool used to conquer the world. And they take this picture, this portrait, and they paint these people and the Europeanized holy figures. Coming into the West, they take this portrait and they take this new form of Christianity and they come to the Americas. When they came to the Americas, they met people that were my complexion and they had different complexions, and they realized that these people were already here, okay? That they already had black people here. Now, why don't people know this? Why don't people know that black people or people who would be considered black were already in the Americas? Well, the reason that this may be news to people, that how is it that black people were already in the Americas? Because humans have been circumnavigating the globe for a very long time. So Christopher Columbus, in his journal to King Ferdinand of Spain, wrote that they were black people in America, in the Americas. Okay, so Christopher Columbus wrote this. Vasco's Nunez, and I'm naming some conquistadors, they wrote this, okay? So that's the primary sources that we have. The first people from Europe that came to the Americas wrote about this. So currently, they have world leaders now coming forward and they're acknowledging the things that street scholars and different historians have been saying. So in academia, in these universities, what take place is that you have to have a certain narrative in order to get funding. If you write something that the government or the people with the money don't want you to write about, then you won't get funded. And this is not a good thing, you guys, because it doesn't just have to deal with history. It deals with medicine, it deals with food, it deals with things that could make the world a better place. When things that could be used as a tool to produce justice or privatize and they're used to only make money, then humans suffer, lives suffer. Okay, so the reason that I advocate the truth is because I would like the world to be a better place. I believe that all people are beautiful. I look at the world and say that we are one big family. We are an interconnected family. It doesn't matter if you're white. It doesn't matter if you're black. It doesn't matter if you're Asian. These are all categories that was invented to divide us. Now, that's either true or it's false. No one should be mistreated based on the color of their skin. I don't think that black people should rule the world to mistreat white people. I don't think white people should rule the world to mistreat black people. I reject all of that. But see, we're going to have to talk about something called the Encomienda system, okay, going back to the Americas. So when the Spaniards came here, it was mostly male warriors, conquistadors. Conquistador is Spanish for conquerors. So when they came here, they had already been fighting a religious war in Europe. And so in Europe, in 1491, King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella expelled all of the Jewish people out of Spain. Well, not all, but most. And these people was called Sephardic Jews. And they forced people to convert. They then kicked out all of the Moorish, which is a word for black, and Moors out of Spain. And the last place to kick them out was Granada. So when they came here, they already had a race-based system. So the Spaniards, they are a mix of people from Germany or Visigoths that they called themselves, who came into Spain, and their culture then became the dominant force. So they became Christian, but they created a new version of Christianity. So when they came to the Americas, the question became, would the offspring of the conquistadors and the Indios, meaning the black people or the native people, the non-white women, the babies between the white males of Spain and the non-white women, would they be free or would they be enslaved? Now, this is a deep question. I want you to stay with me. So what ended up happening is they chose that they would not be free. So they came here, they end up having to mix with the people, but then the babies would not be free. Now, this is going to have far-reaching consequences, because after a while, when more people from Spain reach the Americas, they are going to change the complexion of the people. So we know that Hernan Cortez reached the Central America, Mexico, and in 1521 to 1526, he is going to conquer the place that's now known as Mexico City, okay? So he met a king named King Montezuma. So King Montezuma was king of the people that they called the Aztecs. Now, the Aztecs inherited the land from another group of people called the Mexica. The Mexica is the name that we get Mexico from, okay? And the Mexica stated that they inherit the land from even an older group of people, okay? Now, the oldest group of people that we can find in central Mexico are a group of people called the Olmecs, okay? Now, that's where they have these huge heads and these huge artifacts, which are in museums in Mexico City. Mexico City is a modern city built on an ancient city called Tenochtitlan. Now, the story of Tenochtitlan is a very interesting story also, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm going to focus on King Montezuma and Hernan Cortez for a second, because I've just finished talking about what was going on in Europe, and now I'm going to talk about what happened when Hernan Cortez, the Spanish conquistador, ended up meeting King Montezuma of the Aztecs. King Montezuma owned a vast territory in what is now in present-day Mexico City. Hernan Cortez ended up meeting a conquistador who had crashed, and his name is Aguilar, or Eagle in English. So when he met Aguilar, Aguilar was a conquistador who had crashed and had married an indigenous woman in the Americas. Aguilar told Hernan Cortez that these people do have gold in Mexico, and this is ancient Mexico. This is 500 years ago. But he was saying they do have it, but they are peaceful people. There's no reason to go to war with these people. Hernan Cortez and the invading forces had already been in war in Europe, and they wanted to enrich themselves. Now, what was going on in Europe is that Europe was expelling people who didn't want to convert to Catholicism. And that's how Christopher Columbus, Hernan Cortez, and conquistadors, this is why they came to the Americas with such a vengeance, because they were victims of a greater crime in Europe. Okay, so that's context. So what ended up happening is that Hernan Cortez could not communicate with the indigenous people. But then he met a conquistador, a fellow soldier who had been there for over 10 years, and he was able to communicate with him. He ended up meeting a woman named Malinili or Malinachi, and basically she became known as Marina. And so what ended up happening was they had this young girl who was about the age of 11 or 12 years old, an indigenous woman. The story behind her, and she's going to help the conquistadors, and the legend has it that she's going to help become a translator to Hernan Cortez, who is going to conquer King Montezuma. So Melanili was sold into slavery at the age of 11. She was an indigenous Aztec or an indigenous woman of Mexico. Her father remarried the second wife. The second wife didn't want her, so she was the daughter of the first wife. She was sold into slavery at about the age of 10 years old. When Hernan Cortez meet her, he buys her and 20 other enslaved indigenous people, okay? We're not talking about Africans right now. We're talking about indigenous people of Mexico. So he enslaved her, and then later he entered into a relationship with her, but she wasn't free. And then she spoke a language called Nahuatl. So she spoke the language of Nahuatl, who spoke with Aguilar, the conquistador who had crashed, and the conquistador that crashed spoke Spanish back to Cortez. And then that would become the translation. So the indigenous woman spoke Nahuatl to Aguilar. Aguilar interpreted the Nahuatl because he had been crashed in that area for over 10 years, and then he spoke Spanish back to Hernan Cortez. They end up siding with a bunch of groups that were being subjugated by King Montezuma. And then when they end up siding with the groups that were being subjugated by the king of Tenochtitlan, they ended up attacking them. The first attack by the Spaniards on Tenochtitlan, modern day Mexico City, they failed. And they call this in Mexico basically like El Triste Dia, meaning like the sad night. And so they ended up losing. But then what ends up happening is the diseases that the Spaniards bring is going to infect the people. And then the diseases is how it helped win the war long term. They end up kidnapping King Montezuma in his own castle, and they wanted to use him in order to get the masses of people to bow down to the King of Spain, King Ferdinand, and to accept Catholicism. So from 1526 into the 1800s is going to be ruled by Spain. Okay? Now, the president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, the first female president of Mexico, has now stated that the indigenous people of Mexico and Central America were black people and that they were there prior to colonization. She has built a museum honoring them that she spent 45 million pesos on. Now, this is so significant because this would mean that all of the black people, or most of the black people that didn't come here in the last 100 years, have been here for centuries. Okay, now, moving along. The Spanish created what was called the Encomienda system, which was a racial caste system. Now, why is that important? Because today, if you fill out an application for a job, if you fill out anything dealing with the government, is it true or false that you have to put what race you are? If you fill out a census, you have to put what country of origin you come from. Now, a sidebar, this has a lot to do with what's going on right now with the protests around the world. Okay, so why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because if you don't understand racism, what it is and how it functions, everything that you think you do understand will only confuse you. Most people are confused in the modern world. They don't really understand what's going on because they have no insight of the past. Imagine you woke up and you didn't know your name. You didn't know your parents' name. You walked outside, you didn't even know what city you were in. Would you agree that that would be a bad situation to be in? Imagine you woke up and you didn't know your name. You walked outside and you didn't know what city you were in. You didn't know what town you were in. Would you agree that that would be a bad thing? Well, we have people right now that's like that. They don't know what city they're in. They don't know, and as a result, it leads to confusion. My job when I speak is to decrease confusion. I don't want anyone to be confused. If you have any questions, you can write it in the chat. I don't want you to be confused. The purpose of me talking is to enlighten and to share what I've learned. So in closing this conversation, I want to say that I think that it's so beautiful that the indigenous people left artifacts, left culture, and it's so undeniable that these people were here. Because it's in the way that we dress, it's in the way that we talk. A lot of our words come from indigenous people, like barbecue, hurricane. Did you know that hurricane is an indigenous word? Barbecue. The way that we practice our religion. I could go on and on about this. But this topic is so vast that I would have to do it in a series. I couldn't just talk about this all at once because it would lead to confusion. You know, you can't see it right now, but I have a lot of books that's sitting on my book stand. You know, I really study this topic. It's very interesting, you know. And so I want to thank you guys for coming to my live. I appreciate it. I have a lot other videos on my channel. If you scroll through my playlist, you will see videos of me talking about the the Encomienda system, the history of Spain. I have a lot of different things talking about the history of the Americas. There's other channels on YouTube that's really great too. I like a YouTube channel called Karimo. He's great. He's from Costa Rica. He makes really good videos. Um, he's about the indigenous cultures. You know, this that I'm wearing around my neck, I got this from Colombia. And like I've been to Cuba. So I'm not just the person that's talking on the internet. I actually travel to the places that I speak about. So when I went to Cuba, I've been to Cuba 5 times. When I went to Cuba, what surprised me about Cuba is that Cuba is an interesting place because it has so much history and religion. They practice a form of religion where they mix African spirituality or pre-colonization spirituality with the indigenous religion mixed with Catholicism, and they call it Santeria, you know, and a lot of people don't know this. The same goes for Mexico. In Mexico, they mix their religion, their indigenous religion, with Catholicism. And that's another topic. When a lot of the indigenous people converted to Catholicism, they had to find a way to blend their religion with what the Europeans was talking about. And so in order to convert, they had to find a commonality. And that's another video I have on my channel talking about this, where they took their beliefs and they cloaked it with Christianity in a way to merge the two. And that's how humans are. We find ways to survive even under oppressive systems. A lot of people don't know that a lot of the modern cities are built on ancient cities. Did you know that? A lot of people don't know that, like Mexico City is built on Tenochtitlan. That Chicago, that New York, that a lot of modern cities are actually New Orleans. New Orleans was a trade route that existed for thousands of years, okay? And it's also one of the oldest cities in the Americas, okay? It's so many cities that's like that, but we tend to think that a lot of the places that exist, oh, this is something new. It's nothing new. Humans have been on the planet for hundreds of thousands of years, but the powers that be, they only want you to know about the last 500 years. And I'm going to end my live. Peace.